Man, I was really tired. I was about to go to bed at my hotel when suddenly my boss called me and told me to urgently return to the corporation by 8 in the morning. So I need to organize a return flight, pack my things, and head to the airport. By the time I do all this, it's too late to call my wife and tell her I'm coming home without waking the kids. So I asked the taxi to drop me off in front of the house. I tried to sneak inside without waking my 2 children. It's funny, but the whole house was in darkness, except for the light coming from our bedroom. We usually keep a few night lights on for the kids in case they wander off. I heard the voice of my wife and a man. I felt my stomach falling apart. My children were almost certainly not at home, and were probably with my relatives, as they were often left there. From what I've heard, my wife is clearly having a long-term affair, and she has so little respect for me that they are in our marital bed. What to do, what to do. My grandparents, who sacrificed so much to raise me, told me to always remain calm. I take deep breaths. I had to do this for their sake, so as not to ruin everything. I have a bad temper that I keep behind locked doors. Grandfather said that I inherited it from him. He told me how it almost ruined his life and he didn't want that to happen to me. Okay, my marriage is over. I decided not to seek revenge, but to try to obtain documentary evidence. I pulled my new smartphone out of my pocket. One of the subsidiaries owned by the corporation I work for is trying to get into the smartphone business. As a result of my work, I was given one to use and test. It features an extremely clear camera and a built-in microphone. It also has the ability to record directly to a standard USB memory stick, giving it much greater storage potential. I quietly set down my bags and took out a modified 16 GB flash drive from my briefcase. The flash drive was modified mainly with a 9-volt battery. This way there was no danger of the phone's own battery draining while recording. I crept up to the open door, remaining in the shadows, and was able to record video evidence that my wife was cheating on me. God, that didn't help my pride at all. I better do a DNA test on the children and make sure they are mine. I took a deep breath and continued recording. Maybe I should have plugged my phone in before I started, but now it's too late. What about Dan Simmons? Am I better than Danny? Calm down, Dan is or was my best friend. I was no longer paying conscious attention to what they were saying, but suddenly my brain heard something that broke my control and I rushed into the room. We got into a fight. My inner beast drove him out of the house. Sheila hid in a corner. The beast growled at her. "Come here!" I was completely amazed by what was happening. It was like watching a movie and I couldn't control myself. Each time the beast broke free, and this happened only 4 times in my life. I remembered almost nothing about the events. "Come here!" She crawled across the floor and climbed onto the corner of the bed, closer to me. "I'm so sorry, Steve. I'm so sorry, Steve. I will—" "Shut up," the beast growled. "Do you regret those times with Danny too?" Sheila shuddered. "I wonder how long and how many people you were with." Her eyes were wide open in horror. "Please, I'm so sorry. Do not hurt me. I am so sorry." "You're a cheating bitch. You have desecrated this house. You have desecrated this bedroom. You have desecrated this bed. You betrayed your husband. You betrayed your children." I don't know how she managed to look worse, but somehow she did it. Her eyes widened, her teeth began to chatter, and her face became even paler. Damn, the beast was in shock. I mentally patted him on the back. And then a strange thing happened. It seemed to me that the beast answered me and also patted me on the back in a friendly manner. I had this feeling that he would always take care of me. Wow. "You will pack all your things and leave this house by noon. You will take all the furniture in this bedroom with you, especially this bed. You will leave everything of mine on the floor, neatly laid out. You will respect my things. You understand?" How will I do all this? In fact, I do not care. Maybe you can ask your crazy brothers who I lent so much money to. "By noon," the beast roared. "Yes, by noon, I understand." Sheila shook herself and covered her head with her hands, protecting herself. The beast carried my body downstairs and took my bags on the way to the car. I noticed that Mark seemed to have disappeared. The beast threw my bags into the trunk and sat me in the driver's seat. At that moment, I seemed to have pulled myself together again. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My nose was clearly broken. Well, my good looks disappeared. I started the car and drove to the hospital. At the hospital, doctors discovered I had a broken nose, 2 broken ribs, and a possible concussion. I also had numerous bruises and even 2 minor puncture wounds. They wanted to hospitalize me, but I refused because I had to be at work in 2 hours. They also called the police. I told the police that as far as I knew, I was the victim, but I wasn't sure because I didn't remember much. I categorically stated that I myself was seriously injured during the incident. And I stated that the other party involved was so slightly injured that she didn't even choose to go to the hospital. This was obviously true, as I did not see Mark in the emergency room. They tested me, and I was completely clean. I am a long-time local resident and work for one of the most successful companies in the area. The latter is what did the trick and why they let me go. The officer who interrogated me has a sister who works in the same company. He asked me if I knew her, and I did. I told him how I had to go to work on an urgent matter that caused me to be called back. With the current state of the economy, government officials and employees are reluctant to do anything that would hurt a large employer without good reason. They had my name and address, they decided to trust me for now, and I didn't stay any longer. I had the keys to the company headquarters and entered myself. I also walked into my boss's office. Audrey Hammer was the vice president and my boss. More importantly, her office had a full bathroom with a shower and a sofa. I took a shower, cleaned myself up as best I could, and went to bed. And the funny thing is, I still didn't feel any pain. I pulled into my parking spot and was glad to see Steve's car was already there. I kept sending him as my best troubleshooter. He was severely underpaid and undervalued by the corporation. I was close to doing something about it, but this would mean a showdown with my older brothers. We equally inherited the company from our parents. Being older and male, they thought they deserved the top 2 positions. It became quite tedious to work with and on them in order to keep the corporation successful. Looking into Steve's office, I noticed that he was not at his desk. I continued on my way, hoping that he had prepared coffee. The door to my office was already open, and I entered. Steve's luggage was on the floor, and he was sleeping on my couch. I approached, wondering what time he arrived. If he were really asleep, it would give me the opportunity to look at his face with a guilty pleasure that I could never fully indulge in. Steve is one of the most handsome men I have ever seen in my life. The movies and soap operas I've watched feature gorgeous male CEOs or doctors. Steve really is so gorgeous, and he doesn't even seem to realize it. On the other hand, I'm 5 years older. My hair is going gray prematurely. I don't have time to exercise. And I look 50 instead of 35. People never called me beautiful or even pretty, but at least they didn't call me ugly. I walked over to the sofa and looked down. I gasped. His face was purple and black from bruises. There was some kind of metal splint around his nose, taped to his head. I knelt down by the sofa and touched his shoulder. His eyes suddenly opened, and for a moment, he seemed very scary to me. But then his face took on its usual gentle expression. "Steve, what happened to you?" "Well, let's put it this way. I returned home hoping to surprise my wife, but she surprised me even more. Do you know any good divorce lawyers?" "Yes, actually I know. I knew the best divorce lawyer in town, Heather Alexander. She was my old college roommate, and she owed me money. I called her on her cell phone. "Good morning, Heather. This is Audrey. I need your help, Heather. One of my assistants and good friends needs a divorce lawyer. Do you have time this morning? I appreciate it, Heather. See you soon." She doesn't have free time, but she will do it for me. "So, Steve, what happened?" "Audrey, we have a lot of work to do today. How about you sit next to me while I talk to your friend, then I won't have to go through all this twice, okay?" "Okay, Steve, but I want to hear the full story." Steve was the best executive assistant I could have hoped for. I don't know if he knew how much I relied on him. Frankly, this job would be unbearable if he weren't here. Audrey and I worked for almost an hour trying to fix the latest mess her brothers had made. I swear this company would be twice as successful if they just dropped dead. Heather showed up and I told her my story. I had to lie about the beast. I didn't want them to think I was crazy. I told them that I didn't remember much and that I was kind of blacked out with rage. I showed them my home movie. Now I know what caused my circuit breaker to trip. At some point, Mark asked Audrey, "Are you really so mine that I am more important than your children?" Sheila replied, "I'm yours. I don't give a damn about them." Heather and Audrey were completely shocked. I think I growled, "Heather, I would like to get as much as possible. I would really, really like to get full custody of my children. You can sacrifice all of our assets to do this. But I don't want to pay child support. Right now, I think my kids are with their parents. I'd like to pick them up. Steve, I will do everything I can for you, but even with evidence like this, full custody can be difficult. Your wife may say that she only said it in the heat of the moment. I will draft some preliminary divorce documents and get them ready for signature. Give my business card to your wife and ask her lawyer to contact me. Try to stay calm, regardless of provocations. You've probably already made one mistake without making another. Is it clear?" She looked at me seriously. "I'm so sorry, Heather. I just completely lost control. I'll try to stay calm. Thank you for agreeing to represent me. Audrey says you're the best." Audrey and Heather exchanged a few words in private, and Heather left. The two of us had been working together for a couple of hours, when suddenly I started to get incredibly nervous. I finally understood what was happening. It was approaching noon, and the beast wanted to make sure Sheila had left my house. I planned to let her stay in the house, but the beast had other ideas. Not only did he seem to be out of his locked room, but there was no longer a room to lock him into. Oh shit. "Audrey, there is something personal I need to take care of. This should only take an hour or two. I'm really sorry, but can I leave? I'll be back as quickly as I can." "No problem, Steve. You've helped me a lot, and we're off to a great start on this problem, but come back as quickly as possible." I ran to my car as fast as I could. I was afraid that if I didn't please the beast, he would just take control again. When I pulled up to my house, there was a rental truck and Sheila's two brothers. They took the mattress out of the house. There were also 2 police cars and 3 officers there. I got out of the car with my laptop in my hand. The police were walking quickly in my direction. I set up my laptop on the hood of my car and prepared my movie. "Officers, I will stand here quietly, but there is a recording that I would really like to show you. It's about what happened last night. Please, can I?" "Are you Steve Blaine, Sheila's husband?" the lady police sergeant asked rather firmly. "Yes, it's me, Sergeant, and I promise to answer all your questions to the best of my ability. Could you just watch this recording, please?" It looked like they were ready to handcuff me, but while the sergeant had a rough appearance, she had remarkable eyes that hinted at great compassion. "Okay, Mr. Blaine, we'll look at the recording, but you stay where you are. You have my word, Sergeant." Well, I started the movie and turned the volume up so they could hear it. I think even a few of my neighbors heard it too. Many of them stood outside to watch the show. When it all came to an end, Sheila said, "I don't give a damn about them." Sheila must have heard it too because she dropped the box she was carrying. We all looked over at the noise and saw her picking up her things and putting them back in the box. I saw something I didn't like. "Sergeant, I just saw my wife. Look at the bag full of white powder that fell out of the box." "I saw the same thing, Mr. Blaine." She started running towards my wife and calling other officers to follow her. I remembered something I saw in a movie that I hadn't really thought about. I scrolled to a certain point and zoomed in. On the bedside table was a small mirror with white streaks of powder on it. I made it halfway to the sergeant who was having a heated discussion with my wife. I called one of the other officers over and showed him what my laptop showed. He called the sergeant over and showed it to her. She returned to my wife and handcuffed her. Sheila cried and sobbed. Her brothers stood and watched in shock. The sergeant shouted at them to finish their work. 2 other officers got into the car with my wife and drove away. "Sergeant, what just happened?" "Your wife was arrested for possession of prohibited substances. It's powder. We'll test it to make sure." "What about my children? When can I see them?" I had a crazy look on my face. "Where are they?" she asked. She had a very concerned look and tone. Probably at my wife's parents' house, about 5 miles from here. These are your children. Your wife is in police custody. If I were you, I'd just go and get them if you need them." She looked at me strangely. "Of course we need it. Of course I want to pick them up. I love them. But what if problems arise? I don't want an ugly scene to play out in front of my 2 little ones." The sergeant's worried gaze cleared, and she looked at me almost with relief. "I'll tell you what. These guys are almost done. I'll stay here with you until they leave. Then I will follow you to your relatives. There will be no violence. But while we're standing here, I want a full statement of your injuries, okay? Whatever you want." I came home to find my wife and Mark Grossberg having sex. I decided to write this down for proof. When my wife said this terrible thing about our children, I switched off. The next thing I know, I'm yelling at my wife to get out of the house by noon. I left the house and went to the hospital. I don't know how I got injured, and I don't know if I injured Mark Grossberg. It so happened that I had documents from the hospital in my pocket. My injuries were listed there. I gave it to the sergeant. She looked at him and whistled. "Does anything hurt you?" This is a really strange thing. Not at all. I know that sooner or later the pain will begin, and I'm not really looking forward to it. Do you know that you have the most beautiful eyes? I seem to be a little dizzy. She looked at me strangely and quickly helped me lean against her patrol car. Maybe I should take you to the hospital. I was just tired and only slept for 2 hours. I need to pick up my kids and get back to work. We have a kindergarten at work, so everything will be fine. Okay, but I'll take you to your wife's parents. Whatever you say. My soon-to-be ex-brothers-in-law were finally done. I locked the house and got into the patrol car. During a trip to my soon-to-be ex-wife's parents' house, the sergeant had several suggestions. If I were you, I would get an order for temporary custody of the children and an injunction against your wife, preventing her from entering the family home or your children. Right now, while she's in jail, you're in charge. Make the most of this time. I will follow, I advised her. I called Heather. She was able to answer my call immediately, and I explained what happened. I conveyed the sergeant's advice to her. She replied something about not telling her how to do her job. She promised to sort everything out and do it by 11 tomorrow morning. Somewhere along the way, I started calling the sergeant by his first name, Rosemary, and I started flirting with her. She started giving me some strange looks, but they weren't hostile. Aren't you too happy for someone in this situation? I'm going to pick up my children. I thought I wouldn't be able to see them for several weeks. I have good people who help me. Why should I let my wife's betrayal hurt me even more than it already does? My marriage fell apart. I'm not going to waste a minute. I'm going to enjoy life and enjoy my children. In other words, I'm going to stop and smell the flowers, Rose. I wiggled my eyebrows at her. I don't know if you're very smart, crazy, or if you need a doctor. Or maybe I just need to sleep. There was no confrontation at my mother-in-law's house. She headed to the front door, told them to give us the children, and we left. They never liked or respected me, and I would have no doubt that they knew about Sheila's betrayal. My kids were overjoyed to see me and were excited to ride in the police car. Hope, my oldest at 5, wanted to hear the siren. Luke, the youngest at 3, wanted to ride on Rosemary's lap. I didn't improve the situation by introducing her as Aunt Rosemary. She looked at me with a look that contained a lot of disappointment and humor at the same time. "Aunt Rosemary, are you going to come to our house?" Hope asked. "I can't, honey. I'm too busy." "What shifts do you work, Rosemary?" I asked innocently. "I work from 8 to 5 in the evening all this week," she answered suspiciously. "Then you can come to dinner tomorrow night at 6:30. Hope, you can show Aunt Rosemary your doll collection." "That's great, Daddy." "Steve, You don't want to upset Hope, do you?" "Not at this time." I gave her an innocent, wide-eyed look. "What are you going to eat?" "What do you want for dinner tomorrow, Hope?" "Chicken." "We'll have chicken." The only reason I do this is for the sake of the children. You act like you might not be right in the head, so I better keep an eye on you. Should I bring anything? Hope, what to bring Rosemary? "Ice cream." She stopped in front of my office building to let us out. "Okay, I'll bring the ice cream." Thank you, Aunt Rosemary. Thank you, Luke said. Goodbye, Rosemary. She waved goodbye and drove off. What the hell am I doing? He could be a suspect in an assault case if Grossberg decides to press charges. And thinking about Grossberg, I want to smash his face. What this man did to Steve's beautiful face should be a crime. I couldn't believe it when I was sent to his house on a house call. I've always been a lifelong member of the Steve Blaine fan club, and I thought I'd have to arrest him. I remember that first Sunday 2 years ago when I first saw him with the children in the park. Oh my God, it made my knees go weak. His appearance, his mannerisms, his voice, and the way he moved. This man should be a model. Almost every Sunday he was in the park. I wonder if he ever noticed how the number of women increased while he was there. We even started chatting with each other. Is he still here? Did you see him last weekend? He did the sweetest thing. I started taking pictures of landscapes, which of course happened to include Steve. And I was called to arrest him. Thank God things turned out differently. He then said that I had the most beautiful eyes, and he flirted with me. This is probably because he hasn't slept with anyone for a long time. I must be one of the ugliest women on the planet. I have the shape of a brick and the face of a bulldog, and he flirted with me. It's almost good that he has such a beaten face. I don't know if I could sit across from him with his usual gorgeous face. I wanted to scream like a little girl meeting a pop idol. Calm down, Rosemary. His kids called me Aunt Rosemary. Do your job, Rosemary. You should visit Mark Grossberg and get a statement from him. I dropped my kids off at daycare and hurried upstairs to see Audrey. My behavior was more than a little strange. I didn't know if it was due to lack of sleep or the beast, but I was more persistent. And this flirting with Rosemary, too. I should be grieving my marriage more, but I'm treating it like it happened last year instead of last night. Something was blocking my emotional and physical pain, and I was just hoping that the blockage would last. Audrey and I were able to finish our work that day. Audrey, I think I'll be completely exhausted tomorrow. Do you think I could have a day off? Sure, Steve. I might have to call you, but you can stay home. And I'm sorry for the terrible situation you find yourself in. Good night. Good night, Audrey. What scared me most about my injuries were the broken ribs. While everything else would hurt me, when I eventually felt it, my ribs could limit my mobility, and I had to take care of my children. We took a taxi home from the office, and I ordered pizza for dinner. Hope and Luke asked me where Mom was. I said that Mom and Dad had a big fight, but we both still love them very much, forever and ever. But because of a big quarrel, Mom is going to live at her grandparents' house. Now, I've been out of town a lot lately, so I expected my children to be more closely connected to their mother than to me. The answer I received surprised me. It's okay, Daddy, as long as you stay with us. We are tired of staying at our grandparents' house. I was hugged tightly by both my children. I knew they spent many nights with my wife's parents, but how often did Sheila send them there when she was cheating on me? I heard the beast growl. That night I used the yellow pages to try to find someone to help us within a few days. There was one place that advertised an emergency nanny service. I called them and asked for someone to be sent at 7 a.m. Then I hid the key under the doormat. I decided that the lack of sleep and the pain from my injuries were about to set in, and my condition may be so bad that I won't be able to get out of bed in the morning. That night, I sat down at the computer and transferred most of our savings from our joint accounts into my own checking account. I then canceled our joint credit cards. I wasn't sure if I should go to the bank and empty our safe deposit box or not. I had the only key. I would think about it. We all slept on a double bed in the guest bedroom. Hope and Luke always slept better when they slept with my wife and me. I also thought that this way, if they woke up, I wouldn't have to run down the hall to comfort them. I woke up this morning with Luke and Hope looking down on me. "Dad, someone is ringing at the door." Just at that moment, my mobile phone rang. "Mr. Blaine, this is Gloria. I'm from the service. I'm a nanny. Are you at home?" "Yes, Gloria. Thank you for coming. I'm a little tired." I put the key under the doormat. "Can you come in and go upstairs?" "Of course, I'll come now." I heard the front door open and footsteps. The woman who came in seemed to be in her late 50s. I explained the situation. She needed to get Hope ready and take her to daycare, then take care of Luke for the rest of the evening. She quickly got to work on her tasks and was very warm towards the children. I rested for the day. A messenger from Heather's office delivered the temporary custody order and restraining order. Heather called to say that my wife had been served with divorce papers while she was in jail. She expected Sheila to be released that evening. Between the controlled substance charge and the record, I now had a great chance of getting full custody. While Gloria went to pick up Hope from daycare, I stopped by the bank, bought a new safe deposit box, and moved most of the contents from the old one to the new one. I only left Sheila's things in the old box. At the bank across the street, I opened a new checking and savings account in my name only. I then wrote a check from my old personal checking account to my new bank's savings account. Once the divorce is settled, I wouldn't mind Sheila getting half. But now I didn't want her wasting money on things like illegal substances or bail. I felt amazingly good, although I finally felt pain. It wasn't as bad as I feared. It was my nose that hurt the most. I decided to buy some chicken from the grocery store and cook it tonight. Gloria left at 5, and to play it safe, I asked her to come tomorrow. Rosemary arrived quickly. We had a wonderful dinner. Hope asked to see Rosemary's gun, and Rosemary carefully explained how dangerous real guns were. I must have looked terrible to Rosemary because she kept asking about my condition. I was bad. I decided to get all the attention I could get from Rosemary. She agreed to sit with us and watch a children's movie. Then I persuaded her to buy children. Then I pretended to be dizzy and asked her to sit with me during another movie. I said that I would be more comfortable if she stayed while I was so dizzy, just in case. Keep that in mind. Oh my God, I'm sweating. I've always wondered what the hell is sweat. During the second film, she told me how she interrogated Mark Grossberg. She made me promise not to tell anyone what she said. She found Mark living in a hotel in a nearby town. He was absolutely terrified of me. He said I forced him into the bathroom and attacked him without warning. Rosemary then showed him the film and the part where he apparently throws himself off the bed towards me and the camera. She then listed all my injuries and compared them to his cuts and bruises. She told him that she would be happy to press charges against me, but warned him that I might reciprocate, and if I had done this, he could very well have served time in prison. Mark decided not to press charges. I told her that since I didn't really remember what happened, I wouldn't press charges, although I would have to remember to send Mark's wife a copy of my film. Rosemary left at 11, and I went back to bed with the children. As time passed, I refused all communication with Sheila. I made her talk to my lawyer. My ribs healed in a little over 3 weeks, but my nose still hurt. I redecorated my bedroom with new paint, crown molding, and new curtains. I was finally able to buy a bedroom set that I liked. It was a massive 4-poster bed with matching furniture. Everything was made of heavy dark wood. I liked it. I tricked Rosemary into spending many evenings at my house. I haven't hit on her yet, but I was planning on doing so. I had to wait for my nose to heal. Damn, that thing hurt. Everything was going well at work. I had to spend a few nights away from home, but I was able to hire Gloria for that time. Audrey did everything she could to reduce my trips out of town. Finally, the doctor told me that my nose was fine. I pretended to be dizzy again and tricked Rosemary into staying out late. During the movie, I went and got each of us a bowl of ice cream. When I returned, instead of sitting in my chair, I sat next to her on the sofa, also kind of close. We ate ice cream in silence while watching a movie. I gave her time to relax. Then I pulled her closer. She looked at me. "What are you doing?" "Today the doctor told me that my nose is completely healed. So now I don't have to worry about hurting him by doing something else like kissing you. That's why what I'm doing now is called making a pass. Is this a sufficient explanation? Why do you want to kiss me? I'm ugly. I'm absolutely ugly." I put my finger to her mouth and stopped her idiocy. "You are a healthy young woman about my age. You have wonderful eyes, a wonderful voice, and a fantastic personality. You have an amazingly healthy body and keep yourself in good physical shape. I like you. Can we kiss now?" Oh, I kissed her. I had a lot of fun that night. We never saw the rest of this movie. Unfortunately, the night had to end at our usual time. But she agreed to come tomorrow. Oh my God, oh my God. The sexiest man in this town, and he wants to do it again tomorrow. I must be dreaming. I've only kissed one guy in my entire life, and he was old, uglier than me, and drunk. Things were going well with Rosemary. I mentioned that Gloria sometimes took the children to her home for the night. I then asked Rosemary if she was free all night on Saturday evening. She said yes, but she wanted to show me her apartment. Rosemary greeted me at the door wearing a dark blouse and black trousers. Why do women always dress in dark colors these days? Is there anything wrong with bright, happy colors? I gave her a bouquet of long-stemmed roses and a box of chocolates. She blushed cutely, and her wonderful eyes lit up. I kissed her. For me, it's been almost 2 months since I've had sex. I have an idea. What did you cook for dinner? I have lasagna in the oven. Can you turn off the oven? Yes, please do it. But, sorry, Rosemary, but I'm just too impatient. We made love. Afterwards, I lay down next to her and kissed her tenderly. She kissed me back, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. The lasagna was almost ruined, but still edible. Steve ate 2.5 large pieces along with garlic bread. He needed to regain his strength, good boy. I ate almost 2 pieces. I suddenly understood. Holy shit, I'm sitting here with a gorgeous naked man in my kitchen. Happy day, happy day? The sex was better than I could have hoped for my first time. We ate, brushed our teeth, and I suggested we sit on the couch, watch TV, and cuddle. I was filled with pride. Here, ugly old Rosemary Hoover Watkins drove a gorgeous guy crazy. Keep it up, girl? Yeah. For 15 minutes now, my home phone has been ringing non-stop. I put the phone to my ear and answered. It was my good neighbor and friend Beth. She screamed in my ear. Rosemary, are you okay? We are all standing outside your door and ready to break it down, but we decided that since you're a cop, we'd better wait and see. Honey, everything is fine. I pressed myself against Steve's chest. I have a friend visiting, so I'm really sorry, but we may disturb your sleep tonight. Is it with that gorgeous guy who came to you yesterday? The one you were talking about? Oh, yes, indeed, it is so. Stop talking, Rosemary. And with that, Steve leaned over and kissed me. Outside my apartment, I heard loud laughter, cheers, and whistles. Most of my close neighbors were single women, and I set myself the goal of making friends with them. I am a policewoman. I protect and serve. Well, tonight I was going to keep them awake. I just hoped they wouldn't call the police. We made love all night long. Then we fell asleep. We slept for several hours when Steve woke me up. He had already showered, dressed, and looked as handsome as ever. He apologized but said he needed to go and pick up his children. I smiled sleepily at him and said that I understand. He kissed me, promising to call, and I knew that he would do so. I was completely exhausted, and I didn't have the strength to walk him to the door. I trusted him to make sure the door was locked, so I closed my eyes and went back to sleep. Well, it was a wonderful night with Rosemary. I opened the door, looked at my feet to make sure I wouldn't trip, and closed it carefully, making sure the lock clicked into place. Flashes of light flashed around me. 5 women stood there, some with cameras. They clapped and applauded. I felt a little awkward, but I bowed and thanked them seriously. Then, as one, they extended all their right hands as if they were queens. I walked down the hallway, humming an old Irish tune my grandfather taught me. I swear I heard the ladies sigh behind me. The next few months were pleasant. I didn't get to spend too many nights with Rosemary because of Hope and Luke. But the nights I spent there were always wonderful. There were only 2 problems in my relationship with Rosemary. The worst part was that she seemed to be holding back emotionally. We would start to make some progress, and then she would mentally retreat behind some mental walls. The sex was always great, but the emotional connection was lacking. Another problem that was driving me crazy. There were those damn dark clothes she always wore. She wore black or dark gray all the time. Sometimes she wore a white blouse. But, in my opinion, it was almost the same. I wanted to shake her and scream at her. Dress in some happy colors, woman. Stop looking like you're an undertaker or going to a funeral. My divorce was in full swing, and we had a date set with the judge. Heather proposed to them, but they refused. She warned them that they would be lucky if the judge gave them even that, but they still refused. From Heather, I learned the story of my wife's infidelity. I think about 6 months before I caught her with Mark, my ex-friend Dan talked her into going to a party while I was out of town. Well, he plied her with drinks, and then with illegal substances. They completely lowered her sexual barriers, and they began a 2-month affair. The affair consisted of wild parties when I was out of town. Dan at some point was afraid that I would find out, and he handed Sheila over to Mark, and she agreed to it. So she continued to cheat on me with Mark until I caught her. Sheila was convicted of illegal use of controlled substances, was then admitted to rehab, and is still undergoing therapy. She had some crazy idea that I would forgive and take her back, or at least offer her joint custody of the children. This should not have happened. But in an attempt to convince me, she told her whole story to Heather and asked Heather to tell it to me. She also volunteered for me to talk to her therapist, and her therapist was told to talk openly with me about her condition. I had an unsatisfactory sex life for years because of Sheila, and yet she willingly slept with Dan and Mark. So, although there were some illegal substances in there, it didn't affect my opinion. She didn't take them when I was home. She should have seen at those times that she needed help. But no, she continued. She turned her back on me and our children, handing them over to her parents as soon as I left town. What kind of love does this show for your children? After my parents died, my grandparents fought for almost 4 years to get me out of foster care and gain custody of me. They exercised to improve their health. They took part-time jobs, working 30 hours a week each, to improve their financial situation. They cut their hair and hid their canes to look younger. And my wife gave our children to someone else, so she could have sex with other men. Her parents never loved me, and never really loved our children. They thought I was too pretty and not manly enough to stand next to their daughter. Since our children were also quite beautiful, they were very strict with them and tried to toughen them up. Like people with very superficial beauty may be physically weaker or something like that. Well, they'll never see my children again. And my other ungrateful relatives will never again be able to come to me and profit from my money again. Well, the day for divorce has finally arrived. I went to court and we showed the judge our evidence. She watched the movie and looked at my wife, then she looked at me. The judge looked at my wife like she was crazy. The judge granted the divorce under the same terms as Heather's original proposal. This upset Heather because she thought we would work out better, but I was happy. My ex-wife received half of our assets and half of our retirement accounts, but not half of my company pension. I had to pay her for her half equity in our house. I got full custody of the children. Sheila received 2 4-hour supervised visits per month. I didn't pay her child support, and she didn't pay me child support. I also had to carry her on my health insurance for the next 5 years, unless she got married. I was nasty and got away with it. The loans I gave to her family, well, I deducted them from her half of the assets. Let her argue with them about getting the money back. Not including the value of retirement accounts, Sheila received approximately $350,000. She's also stuck paying for her own lawyer and her share of the legal fees. When it came time to pay Heather, she didn't charge me a dime. Heather said she could never repay Audrey for all the good things Audrey did for her. She knew I had Audrey's back for years. By helping me, she was indirectly able to repay Audrey. I pressed her, but she just told me to just keep taking care of Audrey. Heather Alexander, dear lady, Mark Grossberg left the state completely, and his wife filed for divorce. As for my ex-friend Dan, well, he moved to the other side of town and changed offices. Very rarely will I see him. When this happens and he notices me, he will run away, not leave. Right after my divorcee was finalist, Rosemary left me. She said she wanted to remain my friend. In fact, she desperately wanted to remain my friend, but she didn't think we had a romantic future together. I was sad, but I always noticed how she held back emotionally. A couple of weeks after we broke up, she told me how she met a local FBI agent. I wished her well, but we still met for lunches and the occasional dinner. About a month after Rosemary and I separated, I was putting the kids to bed when I heard strange noises at the front door, whimpering sounds and a slight scratching sound. I figured it was a lost dog trying to stay warm on a cold night. I opened the door to find Sheila leaning against the screen door, crying and languidly scratching at the door with one hand. She had neither a coat nor shoes on. It must have been about 1 at night. What was she trying to do? Die on my porch to make me feel guilty. I had to carefully open the screen door, so I didn't knock her down. I picked her up and carried her into the house. She didn't react at all. I hoped it wasn't illegal substances again. I probably should have called the police. But she was so cold that I decided that she needed to take a hot bath and put her in it. I took off her clothes and noticed how she relaxed. I put her in the bath. I had prepared baths for her so many times that I still remembered what temperature she liked. She used to love to lie in the bath and soak for hours. So what she liked before, I did again. We had a swing-arm LCD TV in the master bathroom. In the past, she often used the TV when she took a bath here. I downloaded one of her old DVDs that she left behind when she left. Sheila had a complete box set of the old Lucy show. It was her favorite entertainment when she was feeling down. Then I went to the kitchen and made her a strawberry smoothie, and also grabbed a bottle of water for her. I returned to the bathroom and stuck a straw in her mouth. I told her to take a sip, and she did. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. So I went back to the kitchen and made her a grilled cheese sandwich and chips. She ate all the food and finished the cocktail. But she didn't say a word to me. She lay in the bath for almost 2 hours. I think she was afraid that if she left, I would throw her out of the house. Finally, I pulled out one of my robes. I firmly told her to stand up, which she did. I told her to put on a bathrobe. I then picked her up and carried her into the guest bedroom and laid her on the bed. I brought the rest of her Lucy DVDs and another bottle of water. I told her to relax, maybe watch a few fun shows, and we'd talk in the morning. It's good that tomorrow is Saturday. I took her clothes to the laundromat and washed them. Then I fell asleep wondering what the hell was going on this time. This morning I was thinking about how to get the children out of the house, but I decided to ask them to wake up Sheila. They could get her to talk where I couldn't. So at 9 in the morning, I told them I had a surprise and took them to Sheila's room. They were glad to see their mother laying there, and Hope ran to stand by the bed while Luke climbed on top of her. She woke up from the cries of, "Mommy, Mommy!" She held them close and told them how much she loved them. She had visited them under supervision in the past, but acted as if she had not seen them for many years. They kissed, hugged, and tickled. It was sweet. And this would be great if she were not a lying, cheating woman. Eventually, they calmed down, and Sheila offered to cook them breakfast. They readily agreed, and she looked at me for permission. I just nodded my head. Yes. I decided to give her more time. With the children. Eventually, Hope and Luke will want to watch TV or play a game. When that happens, I'll talk to Sheila. While the kids were busy watching a movie, I sat down with Sheila at the kitchen table. Sheila, I won't let you stay here forever. I need to know what's going on. Steve, you know my family never really liked you. They thought you were too soft and gentle. If they could have seen you that terrible night with Mark, they would have shit their pants. They always made fun of me and you. Assuming with all your business travel, you were probably cheating. I know that's not true. But that's where my mind was. And then that terrible night when I allowed Dan to seduce me into a life of illegal substances and sex. I had completely lost sight of what it meant to be a good mother and wife. My therapist is still working with me to figure out how I got this far, but you probably don't care. I returned to my parents' house and they began to take advantage of me. They put all the heavy family work on me, filling up all my time so I couldn't find a job. Then they convinced me to lend them money. 2 days ago was the last straw. I found out that my father was writing checks from my account. I don't know how much he stole. I then discovered that he had forged my signature on my car title and gave it to my younger brother. And all this without my knowledge, as if I were some kind of idiot. Well, maybe it is, after I listened to them and betrayed you. Okay, first of all, we'll go to the bank. Then we will file a police report. You don't have to press charges, but it may prompt them to return some or all of your property. Steve, Sheila, you listened to them and ruined your life. You are the mother of my children. Listen to me now, okay? So we got in the car and I took Sheila to the bank. Luckily, Sheila still had a very old pair of dirty garden shoes in her house. Otherwise, she would have to go barefoot. She still didn't remember how she lost her shoes. She simply ran away from her parents' house. When we got to the bank, we discovered that with the loans and money her father stole, she only had $250,000 left. This meant that her father had stolen almost $100,000. We went to the police station, and I asked permission to speak with my good friend, newly minted detective Rosemary Watkins. To put it mildly, she was surprised to see me there with Sheila. We explained the situation to Rosemary, and she promised to look into it. Sheila's parents started calling me at home in a panic, but Sheila refused to talk to them. Since I hated them to the core, I had no problem playing hard. All of Sheila's property was returned to her, including her car. They also had to pay the translation costs. $25,000 were immediately returned to Sheila. Of the remaining $75,000, they signed a loan document for a period of 10 years at 12% per annum. They also had to put up their home as collateral, so it was essentially a mortgage. After that, Sheila no longer wanted anything to do with her parents or brothers. Steve, thank you for your help. I'm glad to see the mother of my children in a better position. Steve, I hurt you terribly, and I still need therapy, but is there any way I can stay in the guest room? This would give me a chance to reconnect with my family. Sheila, I have an offer, but if I were you, I wouldn't accept it. You have caused me severe emotional trauma with your actions. If you want to stay here, you will help around the house and take care of the children. I will set strict rules to restore trust. Think carefully before accepting this offer. Sheila flinched at my words. I suggested that she seriously think about it. If she agrees, I will insist that she discuss it with her therapist. Steve, please believe me. I truly regret my past actions. Sheila, I can't trust you anymore after what happened. I'll mention one more thing. If you accept my offer, the entire house will be under video surveillance. This will be very difficult for you, so do not accept this offer on easy grounds. Sheila accepted my offer. Her therapist was against it. We agreed that Sheila would continue to go to therapy. I arranged a separate room for Sheila and set strict rules. She went back on birth control and had to buy certain clothes of my choosing. I paid her a salary for housework and childcare. The children liked that Mom was back. I reestablished a close relationship with Sheila, but without any feelings. However, I did not trust her completely and continued to set strict limits. One of the people I respect the most in this world is Audrey. I told her a lot of what was going on in my head and what I was doing with Sheila. Audrey wasn't worried about Sheila. She was worried about me. She was worried that the crazy life I was living would prevent me from finding true love someday in the future. I told her there was a woman I was interested in, but due to circumstances, she was unavailable right now. I said I have a plan for the future. Audrey said it made her feel relieved that I wasn't trapping myself with Sheila. How can someone's life be so messed up? I love Steve, but he can make some really stupid decisions. On the other hand, when he has regular sex, it is much more effective. This is the time between Rosemary leaving him, what a stupid girl, and Sheila's return. He wasn't as competent as usual. Steve was still better than most, but he wasn't at the usual high level of knowledge he usually displays. Moreover, there was an underlying tension in and around his eyes that was unpleasant to look at. One of the few pleasures I get from life is watching Steve. I barely survived when he had those terrible bruises and a broken nose. For some reason, this unsightliness in his eyes seems even worse to me. So maybe I should stop complaining about his sex life. I just hope he has this new woman he's after in the future. When my brothers and I first inherited the company, we each received 25% of the shares, and another 25% was sold publicly. I am completely tired of their mistakes and their wasteful lives. Over the years, they sold some of the shares, and over the years, I bought back the shares. So now they owned less than 20%, and I owned more than 35%. It was Steve's job to get another 16% of the shares to vote with me. I intended to replace my older brother as CEO of Hammer Inc. Steve first approached the company's employees to get their vote. It was 7%. He told me that he had absolutely no problems because all the employees knew who made this corporation successful. Steve says the sweetest things. Of the approximately 18% of unaccounted stocks, more than half were controlled by women. I set Steve on them. They didn't stand a chance. One look at his face, and the sound of his voice. Oh, God. The palace coup was completely bloodless. I think my brother saw this a long time ago and just didn't know how to stop it. They retired to the Caribbean islands. As for Steve, I could finally reward him the way he deserved. He will receive lots of bonus checks and a promotion to my position. I hoped he wouldn't be too upset that I couldn't make him president. There was a manager who was truly made for this job, and she deserved it, after all the abuse my brothers caused her. I decided to invite him to dinner at a Hilton restaurant overlooking the city. Supposedly, they had the best prime rib in town, and Steve really loves prime rib. I told him, "Steve, we did it. You have been so wonderful and have been such a great help to me for so many years." We sat sipping wine, and Steve looked at me intently. There seemed to be some strange tension in him, like he was about to jump out of a plane or something. "Besides the huge bonus check, I would like you to accept the position of vice president. I think that you're doing a wonderful job. Audrey, I'm so happy that you can finally run the company without interference. I know you will be a huge success. As for the position, I am very sorry, but I cannot accept it. My stomach cramped and I almost choked on my wine. But Steve, why? Maybe he was upset that he wasn't offered the presidency? As I mentioned to you some time ago, there is a woman who interests me. Our company has rules and policies that prevent me from stalking my prey. So I'll have to quit. He must be interested in another Hammer employee. I can just change the rules if necessary. I'm not going to lose Steve. 2 weeks ago, in anticipation of my future romance, I stopped all physical intimacy with Sheila. She feigned disappointment, but I know very well that she was actually relieved. I have also undergone a complete physical examination, and I am completely free of all illnesses, sexual or otherwise. So now I feel completely ready to start the chase. Why is he telling me all this? I can't let him go. Why is he holding my hand? Why is he looking at me so intently? Why? Oh, God. Audrey, darling, would you like to dance? Stevie was the one who hinted that the Hilton had such good prime rib. He was the one who arranged everything so that on the only free evening we could go, there would be a dance at the Hilton. He set me up. He slowly lifted me from the chair. I was completely shocked. Steve, I'm much older. Shh. You're the one I want. Please dance with me. So we danced, and I didn't want it to end. After 4 songs, the food on our table was completely cold. Steve looked at me kindly. They actually have room service here, but we don't have a room. Please don't think too bluntly about me, but I've been looking forward to this for some time. And with these words, he showed me the room key card. Then this worthless, best negotiator in the world kissed me. Hell, I'd make him CEO after this. I followed him to the elevator. We went to the room and made love there. Steve, I love you. Steve, I love you. Steve, I love you. Steve confessed his love to me. I've always had a crush on Steve, but I was too cowardly to admit it. I thought I was too old. I thought I was too ugly. I thought Steve was too great. And now Steve tells me that he loves me. Don't pinch me now. I don't want to wake up. He was a magnificent, wonderful, kind, and smart man. This meant that he loved me. I was the essence of his joy. On Monday at work, I called an emergency meeting of the board with the participation of the president. I told them all that Steve, had resigned. They were shocked and alarmed. The board was made up of women, and meeting Steve was the highlight of their visits here. I explained that Steve had been romantically involved with one of our employees and had quit to pursue his love interest. Well, everyone appreciated Steve's honesty and integrity, but everyone unanimously agreed that the company needed him. Therefore, the policy must be changed immediately. Then Steve would be offered my old job. Mary, the new president, was not a stupid doll. She looked at me suspiciously. Audrey, you didn't say who Steve is in love with. You two are very close. If he told anyone, it was only you. So who is it?" The room, full of Steve's devoted fans, turned and stared at me. I answered very quietly, "I," and they all screamed. They were so happy for me. For another 3 months, Steve and I made love every chance we got. He was really starting to tire me out, but I was determined to take care of my man. He had a much stronger drive than me and incredible stamina. He has already admitted to me that since the night he caught his wife cheating on him, he has become a sexual beast. I just needed to put in more effort. He was my man and I will take care of him. We were talking about marriage when the little test strip showed a plus sign. With some trepidation, I approached Steve and admitted that I had lied about the pills. This wonderful man was overjoyed that I was pregnant. That day, he wanted to marry me. I'm such a happy, happy girl. We had a very small but very elegant and expensive wedding at the Hilton because we had so many good memories of the place. There were only about 100 guests. Hope was the flower girl and Lukey was the ring bearer. Heather was my bridesmaid. Rosemary was Steve's best friend. The judge in Steve's divorce case attended our wedding. She told us that she never wanted to see us in any official capacity again. She did this with a wide smile. I bought the old family estate from my brother when he retired. Steve's entire family, including Sheila, moved here after the wedding. I let Sheila come because I didn't want Hope and Luke to think I was depriving them of their mother. She was still working as a maid, nanny, and mother, but I gave her a big pay raise. She was still wearing the colorful clothes Steve had insisted she wear. In fact, he made all of us change a lot. I had long changed my wardrobe to make Steve happy, and I had to admit that bright colors also made me more carefree. The way Sheila's eyes followed Steve was heartbreaking. This girl was seriously screwed, and she knew it. But Steve categorically refused to believe that Sheila felt any love for him. I had a problem. I was 4 months pregnant and couldn't take care of my man. In fact, even before I became visibly pregnant, I was already falling behind too. The uncomfortable tension was back in Steve's eyes, and he wasn't in the best shape. It seemed like it wouldn't take long to reliably piss him off. I had a radical idea. I needed a striker, and I had an obvious substitute in the dugout. Steve's love for me was as strong as a steel rod. I talked to Sheila and came up with this idea of Steve filling in for me while I'm busy. Pregnancy and childbirth. To say she was enthusiastic would be a serious understatement. I warned her that I had to tell Steve about this first. Steve felt terrible and heartbroken that he couldn't control his desires. He felt like a failure as a husband. The man was crying. I had never seen him cry before. I cried with him. I told him how I felt like such a failure for not being able to take care of my man. He made me promise that I would still love him if he took advantage of Sheila. He also made me promise that I would have complete control over his inner beast. In the 7th month of my pregnancy, Rosemary came to us in tears. Over the past year, Rosemary has become a close friend of mine. She collapsed into my arms. Who the hell hurt this tough cop? She didn't want to talk to Steve, but she decided to trust me. It turns out that her loving boyfriend was not like that. Oh, to her horror, she agreed to some of his wishes before regaining her pride. But in retaliation, he exposed her behavior to his superiors and thereby destroyed her professional reputation. I knew what to do. I called Heather and told her the name of Rosemary's ex-boyfriend, and then told her what needed to be done. As for Rosemary, I have been thinking for a long time that my corporation should have a corporate security department. I would hire her as its new leader and have her create it. 2 problems solved in one fell swoop. I liked it. Heather sued this stupid joker for everything he owned or would own for the next 20 years. He was out of work after 6 weeks. Rosemary was doing well in her new job, but she was emotionally depressed at home. I persuaded her to move in with us. She had such a melancholic look when she saw Steve. Finally, I asked her why she left him. She said she didn't feel worthy of him. What nonsense! 8 months into my pregnancy, and Steve hasn't experienced any real love in 3 months. Oh, of course he had a physical relationship with Sheila, but it wasn't love, and he needed love. I discussed this topic with Rosemary. Rosemary was skeptical and worried that it would harm my marriage. I knew Steve for almost 8 years. I trusted this man. He was honest and didn't lie. I turned the switch. If I thought things were getting out of control, I would tell him to stop, and he would stop. Simple as that. Then I talked to Steve, and he was even more concerned than Rosemary. It took a lot of persuasion, but in the end, I persuaded him. Can you imagine a wife having to persuade her husband to sleep with someone else? Steve also expressed concern that I would someday want to sleep with someone else. He wasn't going to do this. I told him this would never happen. He is exactly the man I need. So Rosemary joined Steve's harem. The change in her was amazing. I pressed her to change her taste in clothes. She switched to bright colors and even wore a dress around the house. This made Steve happy. And when Steve is happy, he makes me and everyone else happy. God, I'm a happy woman. I thought I would be a childless old maid. Now I have a baby on the way, 2 stepchildren and a great husband, and maybe a couple of sisters instead of those useless brothers. A year later, Steve was furious. His life was completely out of control. He loved it, but he felt so guilty about it. Between Audrey and the Beast, it seemed like he had little to say about his personal life. The Beast loved Audrey. He needed someone to talk to, get advice, and take back control. Steve's mind was still in turmoil over the change. His heart was opening up to Sheila again, and he was so afraid of it. Because of the Beast, Steve had difficulty getting outside help. So instead of talking to anyone, Steve decided to write it all down. Well, the Beast had a weakness when Steve was with his kids. The Beast left Steve alone, and he wasn't completely under control. Steve was going to take advantage of this weakness. Another day, another dollar, I thought with annoyance. I must be the unluckiest psychiatrist in the country. I have 2 meetings today. The guy who called a while ago seemed crazy. I hope I can help him. It was time to get back to earning money. I opened my latest romance novel. My publisher wanted it written in 2 weeks, and I had 30,000 words left. The phone rang, startling me. Janice, my secretary, said, "My 2 o'clock was here." She seemed more than a little out of breath. I was forced to get up from my office chair. The man who entered was carrying a child in his arms, but he was absolutely great. I wanted him to be on the cover of my next novel. I tried to put a professional expression on my face again. "Come on, Margaret, wipe the drool off your face and pay attention." "Dr. Huff, I'm Steve Blaine, and this is my daughter, Victoria." I walked around my desk to coo with my baby. Not many people let me play with their children. He looked down at her with such love and tenderness. This man seemed perfect. Why could he be here? "What can I do for you, Mr. Blaine?" "Please call me Steve. I have an unusual problem. I don't know if I have a split personality or not. I wrote a diary or a story of my life, if you will. It will probably take you some time to read it. Of course, charge me for this time. But please read this and maybe we can meet at the same time next week." He looked at me with such despair. Hell, I'd give him my kidney if he asked. "Of course, Steve. It will be fine, same time next week." Over the course of a week, I read Steve's story. In fact, I read it at least 5 times and also looked at the photographs he included with the diary. Nowhere in this story did he describe the women in his life as less beautiful. I looked at one photo that was actually one of those family Christmas cards that people make that I would never have had the chance to take. It showed Steve sitting with 3 women, 2 children, and 1 infant, probably Victoria. They were depicted sitting on or next to a sofa. To his left sat an elderly woman, rather plain-looking, with Victoria in her arms. To his right was a woman who was completely ugly and clearly pregnant. On the floor at his feet sat a woman in a pink maid uniform. She was also somewhat plain-looking. She was pregnant and had 2 children with her. I couldn't believe this picture. For many nights in a row, I hung this photo on the mirror in my bedroom. I looked at her and looked at my face, looked at her and looked at my face. Hell, I was no uglier than the woman to Steve's right. How did she get so lucky? Steve was back again the following week with Victoria. From his story, I understood why. "Steve, you're talking about the Beast. I know you had a bad time in foster care. The Beast is probably a development from those times. When you had your final shock, the Beast woke up. But in all your descriptions of the Beast's actions, it doesn't seem like he wanted to hurt you. The Beast seems to be more of a protector. I don't know if the beast is just a hidden aspect of your personality or if it represents a real schism, but I think you should stop demonizing him. Give it a different name, respect it. I think you're right. He was my protector. Cruel, but I kind of liked it. What name would you suggest giving him? He gave me a smile. I felt my face warm up. What about Bob? This is a friendly name. Who ever heard of a monster named Bob? He closed his eyes for a moment, as if deep in thought. I think Bob likes his new name. He chuckled for a moment. What a wonderful laugh. And I'm pretty sure he likes you too, Dr. Huff. I felt my face turn red at these words. Most of my patients wouldn't even look me in the eyes. They found me so repulsive. In fact, I didn't have many patients because of my appearance. They had one consultation with me and then found another therapist. Steve never refused to look me in the face. There was never a hint of disgust on his handsome features either. Steve, are you saying that you have a new position? Yes. Audrey said that my skills as a troubleshooter would be wasted as vice president. I really think she hated all those late nights. So I was promoted to board member and am also a special assistant to both Audrey and the president. My work week is only 30 hours or less. I have to admit that I like it. This gives me more time to spend with my family. Both Audrey and Mary, the company president, assure me that I am making a valuable contribution to the company. The next week, Steve became completely desperate. Audrey wants to bring another woman into our house because she's pregnant again, and Rosemary and Sheila are due to give birth in a couple of months. She's afraid that I won't be taken care of. This nonsense needs to stop. That's not how you do that in polite society in this country. Steve, I understand that you are upset. I would like your permission to go and talk to Audrey. She loves you. I'm sure we can come to an understanding. He had a frightened expression on his face. Audrey is the best thing that could happen to me. You can talk to her, but please don't ruin everything for me. I'll do my best, Steve. Everything got completely out of control. I could lose my license over this, but something had to be done, I thought, as I pulled up to Steve's house. I knew he was out of town, and that would give me a chance to talk to Audrey about Steve. She has already agreed to meet with me. I spoke with Audrey for several hours, outlining Steve's concerns. Audrey understood that they were breaking many barriers in society, but now she loved her life. If society didn't like it, they could just fuck off. Audrey, I can appreciate your attitude, but Steve is a very kind person. He thinks he's taking advantage of you all. He believes that he is cheating on his marriage vows. We'll have to work on Steve to convince him that you're all really happy with the situation. I think it would be better if he had frequent and even daily therapy with someone who was at the top of his class. I said the last one very quietly. A smirk appeared on Audrey's face. What exactly do you want to say, Margaret? I can call you Margaret, can't I? Steve told me that you are looking for a new woman. I would like to apply for this job. I said the last part so quietly that I thought Audrey wouldn't hear, but her grin grew even wider. Next Christmas? Merry Christmas from the Blaine family. There were 4 women in the picture with Steve. They all had beaming expressions on their faces. 3 women had children in their arms, and one of these women was pregnant. The 4th woman didn't have a child, but she was obviously pregnant too, and her smile was the biggest of them all. Audrey, honey? Yes, Steve? Judge Grant from our wedding has appeared often lately. Are we in some trouble? Oh, no, Steve, no problem, but you see, we're all pregnant again, and we have to take care of you and Bob, so I talked to Bethany Grant. She's been interested in you for a long time, and subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.